Thanks very much, Simon.
Good morning, Simon. And just tipping off on that first question, is it Xavier? Xavier? How am I supposed to officially announce it?
I think the official line is we don't really mind. The team is half Kiwi, half English. So the New Zealanders like to call it Xavier, and you'll hear Jonathan call it Xavier, but I call it Xavier. The Kiwis have rubbed off on me, but we don't really mind. We've heard Xavier and other things as well. So whatever you want to call it, you can.
So we'll go with Xavier this morning, then. I'll go with Xavier this morning.
Yeah.
So without further ado, then, Simon, I will hand the mic over to you with a virtual round of applause.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And hi, everyone. Thanks very much to start with, Simon, to let me showcase this to you today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through half an hour of a demonstration of what Xavier is, what it does, how people have been using it. And then, as Simon said at the end, we'll do a lengthy Q&A for half an hour to answer any questions that we have. But as I said, do put them in the boxes we go through. People who kind of existing customers to Xavier, I can kind of see some familiar names on the attendees list. There might be a little bit of repetition here, but hopefully it will give you more flavour of Xavier if you're kind of if you're new to it or you haven't seen it before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and just talk through a couple of slides to start with, and then I'm going to dive into the app for you. So here we go. So first of all, just talk about what is Xavier. So Xavier is a toolkit for accountants that helps make sure that your data is accurate. Just a tiny bit of a backstory about how Xavier was started. I'm an accountant by background from practice, and our practice, which was based in Bristol, we were a Xero only practice. We really liked Xero, but we wanted to be able to do extra things with it. And we also were really conscious that data quality was an issue, and we didn't want to have to go into every Xero account to understand what the issues were. One of our clients was a web app development agency, so we partnered with that web app development agency, and this was around 2 years ago now, and we started to build Xavier as an internal tool. Since then, Xavier has grown from what it was as an internal tool to what it is today. So the foundation of Xavier is a data quality toolkit, which helps you understand where the data is not good, to introduce processes to streamline that data. And the final bit of it is around the practice dashboard, being able to see information. Cool. So a little bit of what Xavier is, but I think you'll get a more flavour of that when I go into the app and show you. So where does it sit in like the ecosystem? So probably one of the first questions we'll get is what do we integrate with? So at the moment, the only integration we have is Xero. We will be integrating with QuickBooks Online. At the moment, we plan that to be in Q1 of next year, but that should be quite exciting for us. So in like a general life cycle of a client, you might have a data capture system, you might have an accounting system, and then you might do reporting. So I think where we see ourselves sitting is after you've got the data capture, after you put in the information, Xavier will sit on top of the accounting system to act as a assurance tool for that, to make sure that you have posted stuff to the right place, that your balance sheet is behaving correctly, that your VAT returns have been checked, so that you can do all this reporting. I think what I really struggled with as an accountant from practice is being able to show meaningful information to the clients, and a big problem was the quality of the information. So we're hoping that we can both surface those problems to you, but also make sure the process that you might already have to be a lot more streamlined. So when we go into the app, I'll talk about these different levels of Xavier, but fundamentally there's 3 different levels and then a workflow checklist tool. So the first level is a practice level overview. So for those of you who might use Xero, some people have described this as like a Xero HQ on steroids. So it's got a lot of data from within Xavier that you can use to both track what's going on with your clients, but also start to be proactive in understanding where there might be potential future opportunities with those clients. And I'll go through a couple of those use cases when we get into the app. The client list, this is just an overview of all the clients that you've got within Xavier. You'll be able to see here some things such as this little heart down here. So that's the health score. Is something that a lot of users use and like. And this is us giving you an indication of how good we think the data quality is for that client. And the final kind of part of it is the client overview and metrics. So the practice level overview and the client dashboard have both been at a practice level, looking at information, and the client overview is actually diving down into the data, showcasing what things we found that's wrong with the data quality, and also telling you how you might be able to fix it. So I mentioned there's those kind of three parts, and then a checklist tool. So Xavier Focus, I think, is something that we have been working really hard on in the last 6 months or so. And what this does is this is like a checklist of tasks that you need to do to complete a certain process. So the example I've got here is monthly bookkeeping. So in this monthly bookkeeping task, you might have a series of things that you need to do. And what Xavier will do is it will design this checklist for you. It's customizable. You can change it to wherever you want. And then as you go through it, you can tick these items off, and you can clear down each of the sections to say, yes, I'm happy with this. Yes, I've checked this. Yes, I checked this. And again, I'll show you that and how that works. So finally, before I go into the app, kind of the three main use cases. So we've got data quality checks. So how good is the data quality? There's a report that you can download and give to your clients. So some accountants might be running health checks for people, and this could either be in the onboarding phase, or this could be as part of your offering that you're offering to your clients. So there's a report that Xavier can produce to help you do that and give your clients a deliverable. The second thing is to kind of streamline the processes that you have already. So if you're doing bookkeeping or VAT returns or year-end accounts or management accounts or whatever it might be, hopefully the focus tool in there will help you streamline those processes. And the final thing is the practice management. So the practice management is the overview of the client list. So the client list has got all the information that I mentioned earlier. So you can go into each of the clients and you can understand if you have unreconciled transactions, what the data for all those clients is. So I'll showcase that. And using those three main use cases, people are using it for these different things. So quoting, onboarding, portfolio dashboard, automated bookkeeping, benchmarking, etc. Awesome. So that's the initial blurb. So now if I dive into the app to kind of showcase this to you. So this is what Xavier looks like. This is an example of a demo company. So the way it works is you can go to xavier.com and sign up to a free trial. This will give you a 30-day free trial, and then you can play around to see the information. So each of these tiles here is a client. So I can see here the client, I can see there's a health score, and I can see who it's assigned to. So what we do is on day one, we go into Xero and we extract all the data from Xero and bring it into Xavier. And then once we've done that, we refresh the data every night. So that data is synced every evening, and you can always force a resync if you want to. So if I go into a client, so this is what the client overview looks like. So this is the kind of the report I mentioned at the beginning that could be acting as a health score or a health report. So you might be drawn to this health score on the top right here. So the health score is our indication of how we think the data quality is. So this is built up of a number of metrics, but it's heavily focused on the bank. So does the bank reconcile? Are there any outstanding items? And also, have you coded it to the right place? So are there any tax rates that don't seem right? Are there any account code postings that don't seem right? And additionally to that, there's some other things such as, does my PAYE account reconcile? If you're using the Xero fixed asset registers, does that reconcile? Generally, we suggest that 80% is a good metric. So we're seeing quite a lot of firms use this to, as I mentioned at the beginning, for the onboarding process. If you're bringing on a new client who's already on Xero and you want to be able to price them, you can run them through Xavier and you can get an idea of what the quality of the data was before you took them on. And then again, you can charge them for that if you need to. So I can take you from 40% to 80%, but we'll need to charge you for that. This kind of overview screen here is to do with, this overview screen here you can download a PDF of. So if I click on this PDF, I can download this, I can white label this as a report, and I can give this as deliverable to someone.
Hi Simon, Peter's just asked, why is 80% a good score? Why shouldn't it be 100%? What happened to the 20%?
So I think, I think we will all strive for perfection, but there's one metric in here that's maybe not that you can't. So debtor days is something that we look at, and we suggest that you have a good debtor days, but that makes up 5% of the health score. So obviously we want to have as good a debtor days as possible, but that might not be something that you can control.
Okay.
So I think 100% would be great, but I think generally if you've got above 80 for the things that we've checked, it generally is a good quality. Anything above that is great.
Brilliant. And from an auditor accountant point of view, is there a breakdown of the 100%? So we know that 5% relates to debtors and 20% equates to the bank or whatever it is. Do we get to see that?
So there is a breakdown of what everything makes up the health score. We haven't got there's a breakdown of all the things that make it up. So if I quickly go into the help docs here, I can show you that. We don't say exactly what makes each part of it. Partly, but we don't. I suppose we don't want to. We plan to kind of improve this over time as we introduce new features. We probably will introduce new things that improve the health score. And also it's a little bit of our secret sauce, I suppose. And so we want to kind of make sure that we can edit it and change it and the algorithms behind it, but don't necessarily want to tell everyone about it, if I'm completely honest.
Yeah, I suppose just from my perspective as a practitioner, if I've got a team member that's got a client and it's at 75%, and I'm saying to the team member, come on, it should be 100% or at least 80%, the team member could turn around and go, well, I've done everything, but I don't know where that 5% is. And there's a potential element of escapism from a team member perspective that perhaps but anyway,
I understand that. So I think these are the 8 things that make up the health score. So if you've looked at these 8 checks within Xavier, and they are either you sorted out what we spotted as a potential error, or you said it's not an error, you'll have a pretty high health score.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. And Keith, I've got your question. I'll reply to that. And Penny, I've got yours. I think we'll get to that bit in a minute, perhaps. Okay, thank you. Cheers, Simon.
No worries at all. Thank you. So as I mentioned, this is that overview. The health report that you can send to someone. So as you can see, this report, it describes what the checks that we've done, the errors that we've potentially spotted, and then a little description about each of those checks. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is white labelable, so I've got example firm in here, but you can have your firm, you can have your logo, so it looks like a report that you can send out. So hopefully that's useful and can be almost used as a deliverable to give to your clients. So if I just go through kind of the fundamentals of the client list, so cleanup is the first section. So cleanup is around transactional level data and trying to understand where that data doesn't match. So the first thing that you might want to do is make sure there's data in the system. So one of the main ways to do that is make sure the bank's reconciled. So the bank rec in here is like a Xero bank rec for people who use Xero. It will show you the unreconciled transactions, the outstanding payments, the outstanding receipts. And if you're using the focus functionality that I mentioned earlier, this might be the first check that you do. So before I start actually doing anything, let's just make sure we got the data in the system and it's working. So that's the bank rec. The second thing that we rely heavily on within Xavier is the contacts. So contacts is a key kind of metric for us, because a lot of the checks that we do is we look at a contact and we look at other transactions against that contact to try and understand if you've posted different account codes or tax rates to that contact in the past. So duplicate contacts, what it does is it goes through your contact listing and it will search for potential items that could be similar. So for example, it might have a Amazon LLP and an Amazon UK. They might be 2 different contacts in the system, and they're all kind of transactions will be embedded between the 2 different contacts. But actually, for our checks to work effectively, we want to be able to show that under one contact. And also, if you're doing reporting based on customers or suppliers, you want to have one contact as well. So the first thing we recommend that you do is go through this list and go through that.
Hi, Simon. Sorry, I think this is the appropriate time for Penny's question. Penny's asked, we found multi-coded contacts an issue too, as many contacts will need different account codes within the same contact. Is there now a quick way to sort this?
Yeah, sure. So I think the contacts is cleaning up, and then multi-coded contacts is using those contacts and then looking at the history of that contact. So I think I'll just explain how this works, Penny, quickly, and then I can kind of answer your question. So the multi-coded contacts, what it does is looks at a given contact, looks at its history, and then says, okay, you've coded this contact either different tax rates or different account codes. Are you happy with that? So in this example here, I can see Port and Freight Limited has been coded to 3 different VAT rates. I got 20% here, so I can see what those are. If I want to, I can go into the system and see them. I've got 0 rated EC services, I've got 0 rated EC goods. That might be fine. If it is fine, I can dismiss it and I can get rid of it. But quite often we find that differing VAT rates or differing account codes suggest there could be some errors in the bookkeeping process. Penny, with regards to your question, in having different account codes, so against a contact, this dismiss section here, if you dismiss it, we won't show it again against that contact. So if it is the case that you are happy that Woolworths Market has been coded to different account codes or different tax rates, and it always will in the future, you can dismiss it. At the moment, you have to dismiss it by individual contact. There's not a way of multi-dismissing that, but it is something that we're looking into to make that more streamlined for in the future.
Excellent, thank you. So Penny, I hope that answers your question. If not, you can flow it again. Yogesh, I've got your question. If you can come back at the end once Simon's finished the demonstration, if you still don't see how it works, then feel free to ask a further question. This is a yes/no answer, I think, Simon, in order to keep from a timing perspective. Becky's asked, is there a quick way to duplicate contacts?
No, unfortunately.
No, so you've got the information, then we need to do the work. And then Jan has asked, can anybody purchase the software, or is it just for accountants?
So anyone can purchase it, yeah. So it's so we do have some people who just use it for individually. There are some practice-related terminologies in here. So like in the main screen, for instance, it will say the practice analysis and practice dashboard. So that will still show if you've only got one customer in here or one Xero link, but there's no reason that other people can't use it. For their individual businesses.
Thank you. And then just lastly, Penny shared, just to let you know, we found £800 of missed VAT using Xavier. So it's a little testimonial for you, Simon.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Yeah, I think we do hear a couple of those, particularly where like Receipt Bank has, or Receipt Bank or any other tool has kind of used the account code default as a tax rate on it, and actually it should be 20%, and then you can get some big differences from there.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Just quickly go through a couple of other things in the cleanup. So contact defaults is using the Xero contacts. So if you feel who use the default contacts in Xero, this can be useful if you are raising sales invoices or purchase invoices in Xero. If you have a default set in Xero, it will automatically populate that information. We'll have some questions later on about Receipt Bank and how it works. I think we haven't, as a disclaimer, we haven't kind of, I mean, we're on day 5, so we haven't agreed how everything's going to work. But I think one of the first things that we'd really like to be able to do is be able to talk to Receipt Bank from, and be able to set defaults within both systems. So if you're in Xero and you actually know, or you're in the accounting system and you know you always want to code City Limousine to sales, you can set a default in here, it push it into Xero, and then it would push it into the other system as well. So I think that's one of the first things that we'll do. But as a disclaimer, we haven't actually discussed that. But I think that's one of what things we'll start to do. Final thing I'll quickly go through in here is duplicate transactions. So unfortunately, I don't have one in here. But one of the things that I found a struggle was that sometimes, particularly if you're doing a bank reconciliation and you've got a bank transaction and then you've got a purchase invoice, if you don't match those transactions, you might do a create transaction on the bank or a spend money transaction on the bank. There's two transactions in the system, and sometimes it's not really obvious where those transactions are. So what duplicate transaction does is it uses the contact name and it uses the value, and it searches around the value a certain number of days. So say you spent £100, I'm going to get Amazon again, you spent £100 on Amazon on a certain day, and then you had an invoice 2 days later on a certain day, and you did a spend money transaction on day 1. We would then show you, okay, there's 2 transactions here that look pretty similar, just double check that they're not duplicates. So that's how they're duplicate transactions. Awesome, okay. So those are the main cleanup items. I'll just touch on a couple of the insights, but the insights generally are about looking at more balance sheet data, or looking at things that we found useful as an accountant, looking at either the year-end process or something like that. So a really popular one is historical changes. So we have an integration with Company's House. So if you have the Company's House number set up in the account system in Xero at the moment, then we will go to Company's House. We'll tell you when your accounts have been filed, and we will also tell you what filing period that was made for. The reason we want to do that is sometimes people might have experienced this in the past. you get around to do a year end, the first check you might want to do is, okay, I want to check Xero to the last year's submitted accounts. Sometimes if a lot date isn't set or someone's changed something for some reason, what's in Xero doesn't agree to the year end accounts. Therefore, you've got to go through a process of looking at the year end accounts, looking down the TB and trying to work out where the difference is. Historical changes is to try and help you stop that to start with, but if it does happen, to highlight to you where that's happened. So what I've got here is I've got a date range. So here I've got 1st of April 2019 to 31st of March 2020. And I will look at all changes since the 31st of May 2020. So what this will do is pull back all these changes. So here I can see all these different account codes. These are the changes that have happened. Down the bottom here, I can open this up and I can see each individual as a journal and I can understand what it is. I hope that makes sense and how it works. Throughout the app, you'll see this kind of grid here. So whenever there's this grid here, you can always right click on it and you can download it as an Excel document if you'd like to. So if you prefer to play around with the information in Excel, you can do that as well. So this has saved me some significant time in the past. So hopefully it can do as well for you in the future. Just one or two more things in here. So if you're doing provisions for corporation tax as part of a process, you might have a calculation or Excel sheet elsewhere to do that. What the corporation tax insight is about is being able to try and automate that for you for a little bit. So here is a really simple corporation tax computation where you've got revenue, other income, operating expenses, and you've got some add backs, you've got some capital allowances, and at the end it spits out what the corporation tax payable is. Each of these, you can change what is included in this in these sections. So for instance, if you want to exclude dividends or something like that from this calculation, you can do that by clicking the account code, and at the bottom it will spit out a value. So those are a couple of things from the insights that are more balance sheet rated. I'll quickly touch on activity stats. So activity stats, if people are using transaction-based pricing, you might find it difficult or onerous to kind of count transaction lines. Say you're pricing a VAT return and you have to go into the bank and count a certain number of transactions. The idea of activity stats is to try and help you do that. So, but what we'll do is we'll show you the number of sales, bills, credit notes, manual journals, and bank transactions that have gone through a given client in a given month. So a lot of people are using this both for the initial proposal, but also for repricing. Again, this is a downloadable report, which you can give to your clients as part of your proposal or your reprice. And very soon there will be an integration with this with GoProposal for people who use GoProposal. So this data will get pushed into GoProposal as well, which should be pretty exciting. Last thing in the insights is around analysis. So what I found sometimes is that, okay, at this point, we're happy with the transactional data, but actually if you're doing a P&L review or a balance sheet review, you want to understand any fluctuations or trends in data. If you're doing that in the accounting system, sometimes you just look down each of the account codes and it can be actually quite difficult to see where there's fluctuations by supplier. So the idea of cost analysis is to be able to highlight those fluctuations for you. So here I've got by supplier, I've looked at the suppliers and I can see there's a big anomaly here. There's a lot of expenditure going through this month. So we just want to highlight that to you to say, are you happy with that? Is this something you need to look into? As with everything, if it's not real, you can dismiss it. If it is real, you can go into Xero, click on the link and see what's going on. The same again here, but by account code. So again, here I can see light, heat and power has got a big increase 1 month. Again, we want to highlight that to you. Some other quite cool things I use cost analysis for is if you are looking at doing prepayments or accruals, this frequency thing here, so you can filter by frequency. So you might want to look down your accounts and see, okay, which of the suppliers or which of the account codes has got an annual frequency. That might mean I want to accrue over a certain period of time for that expenditure. So it could also help in that purpose as well. Okay, question, Simon?
Yeah, we got a lot. Yeah, before you were about to move on to the next section.
No, sorry. Yeah, Karen, go for a question.
Yeah, so what I'll do, Jan, and I know you've answered your own question now, but I'll ask it for the benefit of the community, so everybody gets a chance. Once you've sorted the errors or dismissed as being okay, does the health check immediately update? Does the score immediately update?
Yeah, so anything you do within Xavier or dismissing anything, this will immediately update. If you change stuff within Xero, all you have to do is just click sync with Xero and that will refresh the data that we have, and then that will update the health score as well. Excellent.
Hillary's asked, does it work with non-UK businesses? So she's thinking about the VAT elements aspect.
Yeah, so we have like a international version of this, which doesn't have as much of the VAT elements. We are working on the worldwide functionality at the moment. So and we're starting with New Zealand and Australia, but we'll continue to do that in the future. But a lot of the checks that we've got in here, particularly the transactional ones, they'll still work with international companies.
Excellent. And just specifically for Sandy, who's in the US, how does it work in the US on prior year comparison?
So I'm not 100% sure maybe prior year comparison, but the historical, if this is to do with the historical changes checks in here. So in here, you can set this date range to whatever you want. We won't have the integration with the Companies House equivalent in the US to tell you when something's been filed. But if you know that information, you can still use this to understand what's changed since last year. I suppose the thing that every Xero transaction has, it has two dates. One date is a date it was posted to. So I can post a journal to any date I want ever. The second date is a created date, which is today's date. So what we're doing is looking at the created date versus the posted date, and that doesn't really matter what nationality that's on. So you can use that for anyone.
Thank you. Jerome's asked, will it detect all bank accounts linked into Xero?
Yeah. We'll in the bank reconciliation, anything that's classified as a bank account, we'll detect that. Yeah.
Thank you. Do all staff use this or just managers? Because our customers are allocated to staff members, and can you see who they're allocated to? And if that's a quick answer, give it. If not, then because I know there's a crux of questions about use and selling it and making money out of it and efficiency. So if that's a quick answer, okay. Simon, there you go.
It's a relatively quick. So I think we find that across the board people are using it. So a lot of the kind of, I suppose if I say the doers are using it to use the checklists and use the workflows to actually do the work, and then the managers are using to review that. Within each client, you can assign account managers. So you can assign someone to a client. You can also change the visibility on every client. So if you only want certain people to see certain things, you can do that. So the answer is it's kind of used across the board.
Excellent, thank you. Sarah's asked, if I'm happy to dismiss a multi-coded contact warning as part of a period end process, can it be reinstated the following period?
So with multi-coded, so yes, with multi-coded contacts, what we do is we dismiss based on the contact name. So what will happen is it will go into the dismiss section. So if you wanted to reinstate it, you can undo it from the dismiss section, and that will reappear for the next time, and then you can see what the kind of the errors that we showed in the past.
Excellent. And Misha, I think that's answered your question as well. So I'm going to dismiss your question, but if not, then feel free to ask it again. Howard's asked, is that working to Xero reporting codes?
So perhaps you're looking at the corporation tax. So we do use Xero reporting codes where we can to try and make it more so you don't have to configure it yourself. But wherever we do use Xero reporting codes, there'll always be the option. There'll be a little cog here where you can click on it and you can change what we've mapped. So we will use Xero report codes where we can, but you can always change it if you're not using Xero report codes.
Thank you. Keith's asked, why review the account detail in Xavier when you can already do this in Xero?
So I think if you're looking at in Xero, you're looking at every single transaction, which can take a really long time. And what we want to do for you is be able to just highlight where the errors are. I think we're always going for exception basis. We don't want you to spend hours going for everything. We can hopefully make that a lot quicker for you.
Excellent. And this is a really good question, Brett. And so can you push, when you've done that corporation tax computation, can you push that through to Xero, or do you have to post it as a journal?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? Yeah, so not at the moment, but it's something that I'm hassling the development team to be able to do. So I would like to be able to do that, but not at the moment.
Okay. Nicholas asked, would duplicate transactions work for foreign currency transactions?
So duplicate transactions... Sorry.
Yeah, so did you say that it would look around the value? We quite often have a pound unpaid differ to the exchange rate calculator.
Yes, at the moment, the duplicate transactions is exact value. So the two things that can't change are the contact and the value. Just because we get a lot of noise, there's something that I want to do in the future to have like a variable on the value. So that will pick up the foreign exchange, as you mentioned. But at the moment, it is just exact contact and exact value.
Thank you. Jan says the software is so cool. So thank you very much. You've got one raving fan already. Neil asks, can you filter the analysis by tracking code?
So you can. So this kind of information here, you can't filter by tracking code. There is, so the sandbox is like every journal in Xero. So we have at the bottom here, there's a thing called sandbox, where if you want to see some data in a certain way, you can do that. And within here, one of the things you can do is you can filter by tracking category. So if I wanted to just see some certain transactions by tracking category, I can bring this into here and I can see those transactions. We probably don't have time to go through that today, but an example of what this could look like is, say I'm looking here about the different tracking categories and I'm seeing the total values of those. So you can't filter the reports by that, but you can use this report to see the information you want for a tracking category.
Thank you. And then I've got your question, Angela. We're going to get to pricing and how it all works before we disappear. So I'll save that question for that period if I can. So that's all the questions that I've got in at the moment. Other than to say, Luke, yes, it is currently being recorded and you will get a recording subject to everything working. But yes, Luke, it is being recorded.
Awesome. Okay, so I'll just probably take 5 more minutes to kind of show you the other bits, and then we can go into the deep Q&A if that's okay with everyone. So just last couple of things from the insight. So one of the things that we've shown you a lot of so far is the kind of the transactional level detail. What we're looking at and moving more into is the control accounts. So control accounts was actually released yesterday. It's pretty new. So what we're trying to do here is highlight where there's problems in control accounts. And what we started with is payroll. Particularly because at the moment there's a flow scheme and there's lots of changes in payroll, but also payroll accounts are really sensitive and we want to highlight that to as early as possible. So here what we do is we look at, we've got 3 accounts and as you mentioned earlier, that we'll use the reporting categories where we can to map these, but again, you can always change these using these cogs. And here what we'll look for is we'll look for journals and payments depending on certain logic. So for example, for the PAYE status check, we'll always look for a journal and we'll look for a payment by the 22nd of the following month. So in this example here, I can see there's a journal being posted, but the payment hasn't been made by the 22nd of the next month. So therefore, we're flagging it as an error because they've missed their PAYE payment. So the same again for net wages and the same again for pension status. So that's kind of a flavor of the insights. Last thing in here is resilience. So what we've worked on a lot as well at the moment is data quality, but also what we want to be able to surface to you is not only how good is the data, but if the data is good, how resilient is that business? So this is just some really high level metrics that can help you have those conversations with those clients. So this sample here, we flagged that their revenue's gone up by 247%. So they've had a very good month. So this might be something that you want to engage the client with to talk about. So this could be just a little check you might do before you speak to someone to see what's happened in their clients. So there's revenue movement here, there's net asset movement here. So net assets gone down. This is very bizarre. Revenue's gone up, but net assets gone down. And then also we've got a customer reliance here. So are you too reliant on one customer? So the demo company has got a 40% reliance on Ridgeway University, which might be too much. So you might want to talk about diversifying their customer portfolio. And the last thing in here is supplier reliance. So this is, are you too reliant on one supplier? So our idea with this is to try and give you a toolkit to be able to talk to your customers, but narrow it down to the most important things. So we're starting with business performance, but we'll also be looking at cash management and also some stuff around compliance. And that'll be phased in the next few months. Really quickly, I'll just quickly show you the focus. So everything I've talked through so far is kind of the individual client checks. And you'd have seen they would have been made of little cards. So those cards are basically, we allow you to be able to design that into a checklist. So if you sign up to Xavier, we'll give you like 3 out-of-the-box checklists, which is monthly bookkeeping, VAT, return preparation, and year-end accounts. But basically, these are just a list of checklists that you've got. Down the bottom here is our database, and you can build this checklist to however you want to do it. So I can delete some of these, I can move various things around, I can do whatever I want with it. So the idea is you can make a checklist. Once you've got that checklist, you can assign it to a person, you can assign it to a client, and then what it will look like is I would go through down the checklist and I would tick various items off. So if the first thing I wanted to do on a checklist was tick off and click this, and so I'm happy with that. So I click down receipt bank, I can do that. For each of these, you can add comments. For where there's an intelligent check, so duplicate contacts I went through earlier, it'll just be embedded within the checklist. So where we see this working really well is either as if you've got a wider practice management tool, it's part of that process. So it could be that you're using it as part of that process. Or it could be if you don't have that, you can use this as that checklist, and you can have these kind of custom checks is what we call them. So hopefully, the kind of question earlier around who would use this might be more the people who are doing the work. So after you've put the data into the system, you've done the bank reconciliation, you might come into Xavier, run through the checklist, and someone can go through and they can tick these various items off. everything in here. They can mark as complete, they can mark as whatever it might be. Then there's functionality in here to be able to review this as well. So if you want to have a reviewer, someone can go through this and then it can get pushed to a reviewer. As with lots of the reports in Xavier, you can download them as PDF. So you might save this as something with your working papers, or you might even give this to a client to kind of show the work that you've done. So that's focus in a very quick snapshot. And the last thing I mentioned at the beginning was the practice dashboard. So everything that we've kind of gone through so far is at a client level. So what we wanted to do, particularly from the accounting practice that I'm from, we wanted to understand a few certain metrics. So we didn't actually know at any given point in time how the team were doing, like how many bank reconciliations had they got left to do, had they filed their VAT returns, that kind of thing. So this dashboard here allows you to be able to kind of dive into different bits of information. So basically, it's a big old data grid, and if people who like pivot tables, it's quite similar to a pivot table. Down here, I've got all the columns I can choose. But if I just showcase something to you quickly, what I could do is bring in the client name, I could bring in the health score, I could bring in the year end. I could group by the account manager, which I showed you earlier, which is the person assigned to it. I could then bring in the unreconciled statements, the unreconciled payments, and the unreconciled receipts. So the first cool thing in here is I can see by person what their average house score of their client is. So I could say, okay, who's got higher house scores than others? I could then open this out and I could see Rachel's got these 7 or 8 clients. This is how they're doing. I might filter by year end to say, okay, who's got a year end coming up and who's got a low health score, and then I can understand what's going on. So to start off, you could do some good stuff from me, just checking what's going on, either if you're the person looking at it or you're kind of the manager reviewing it. Whenever you've got a view that you like, you can save it as a report, and that will kind of save it to the customer report section, and you can just dive back into it. It'll be the exact same view as you've seen before. The second thing that I find really useful with this is if you just want to understand or diagnose where there might be some problems. So whose account where the POA account doesn't balance, or what are the POA balance. So I can quickly understand whose POA balance reconciles. So down here, I can see who reconciles, and I can go in and I can see that without having to go into every single Xero account to see that. The final thing that's could be useful for is being a bit more proactive with some of the clients. So particularly at the moment, if people are struggling from like a debt collection, or they just have got low cash, what I could do here is bring in the debtor balance, and also I could bring in the cash position. So in here, if I pin this column to the left, so I could then see, okay, this client here has got a really high, this client's got a really, relatively high cash position, debt position compared to their cash. They might want to benefit from credit control, or whatever it might be. So there's loads of use cases you could use in this, but I suppose that's a couple of ideas. Awesome. I will stop there.
Brilliant. Thank you, Simon. If you want to just unshare your screen, so we're both, that's brilliant. And then I'll do that, and then that'll make it easier from my end. So we've got lots of questions in the Q&A, and also got obviously the preloaded questions. Before we get onto the receipt bank conversation, can I just, there's a couple of questions. So Penny and Jan, when you was talking about the control accounts, can you set up your own control accounts? And in particular, can you do one for CIS? And Howard also asked, can you do one for C79 import VATs? Is that possible?
Yes. So at the moment, the control accounts are relatively rigid. They are for the payroll accounts, but the plan is to have custom control accounts, which would follow a certain logic, which you might expect for a control account to follow. So at the moment, no, but the plan is to introduce those, yes.
Thank you. And then Goulston's asked about reconciling transactions in Xero that don't reconcile or don't appear to be reconciled in Xavier. And then a subsequent question is, so does Xavier sync instantly with Xero? I think Goulston, you missed the answer to that earlier, but.
So yeah, so Xavier would sync overnight. We sync overnight. If you need to sync it, you can click sync. With some of the bank reconciliations, so there are some instances if you've got really old bank transactions, that if it's a few years old and you change that transaction, we might need to do a refresh from the Xavier end, just because of the length of the time between that and the way that our system works. So it's pretty rare, but only if something a few years ago, there might be a discrepancy, but generally that doesn't happen.
So basically, if you do it and it's not reconciling as quick as you want, then press the sync button, and it should do it as quick as you want.
Yeah.
Thank you. Does it sync with Workflow Max?
No, we don't have any sync with Workflow Max at the moment. But if there's anything that you can think of, how would that be great to know how you want that to work?
And then Caroline's asked, you mentioned Go Proposal integration. Could you recap what data will flow into Go Proposal?
So what we will send to be Go Proposal, we'll be sending health scores, we'll be sending number of transactions for bills, credit notes, journals, that kind of stuff. So I don't want to steal the release thunder, which will happen soon. But what we're hoping is that in the proposal, when you go through it, you can see those metrics. So you can see if you're doing a year in account, say, you can look at what the health score was and price based on that. So if they've got a low health score, you're going to price more and other things like that. But James will be hopefully talking about that soon from Go Proposal.
Thank you. And what I'll do, we're not talking about pricing, Simon. If you could just cover off pricing.
Yeah, so the way that we charge Xavier is £5 per month per client, and then it kind of scales as you get more clients on there. There is, obviously, as everyone knows, we kind of joined Receipt Bank 5 days ago, so there are some discussions about pricing that we're still ongoing, and genuinely, we are still working on that. And I would tell you if we knew what that position was yet. The likelihood is that pricing will remain the same for the foreseeable future. And what we will do is looking at increasing our functionality, but also integrating with Receipt Bank where we can to be able to improve the kind of workflow between the two systems. So my kind of view at the moment is that it's not going to change significantly. It will still be based on number of clients. There might be some bundles offered rather than just by client amount, but that's kind of what we think at the moment.
Thank you. And I've put the URL for the website into the chat box for everybody. And did you say earlier on that there's a free trial or a setup trial or something?
Yeah, so there's a 30-day free trial on the website. You can just click Try Xavier. It's got full functionality. There's just a limit on the number of organizations you can add. So there's a 20 organization limit. If you want to get rid of that limit, you just need to put your details in, card details in, and it'll get rid of that limit. And then you'll just automatically go onto the paid plan.
Thank you. And then Angela's asked, whilst we're on the subject of pricing, I see you charge per client per month. If you're using it as a proposal tool initially and the client doesn't come on board, would it be easy then to remove the client so you don't get billed for the ongoing months?
Yeah, so within the kind of system that I was just in, you can just click remove. And so you only get charged for when that client is active in a given month. So if you load it in for one day in a month, you'll get charged £5. If you load it for 30 days in a month, you get charged £5. And then if you remove it before your kind of billing period ends, you won't get charged the following month.
Thank you, Simon. And Angela, I know lots of accountants within the community that use it like that. So when they've got a proposal in front of a client or they're sat in front of a client, they can analyze the data before they take the mistake or make the mistake of taking them on and ending up with a bag of, I'm looking for a polite word, rubbish. It's probably
Bash. Yeah. Well, it's a bit American, isn't it? Yeah.
Not that it is a bag, it's an electronic bag of rubbish. But anyway, brilliant. So that's answered all the questions that we had in the chat box. And I will please put any more in there that you've got come through. Nicola, I've just got yours. But let's look at the Receipt Bank question. Will I get Xavier as part of my Receipt Bank subscription? I think you've just answered that. How does this work with Receipt Bank? I think you shared that as part of the demo, but
so at the moment there is no integration with Receipt Bank whatsoever. So I think what obviously Receipt Bank, there's a lot of stuff at the initial end between extraction and data quality. So I think we're excited that we'll be able to access some of their data about that, and we can only get better at our checks. And then also they can kind of see from the accounting system, they can get a feedback loop as well. So I think it's still to be defined, but there'll be a closer integration with that whole life cycle. So hopefully you no longer have to change two systems, you change one system and the whole ecosystem will be affected. Then also obviously Receipt Bank is a pretty large organization compared to us and the amount of information they have. So hopefully that data that they do have will only make our checks better and more accurate for you.
Okay, so just to expand on that, Simon, in a number of different forms, this question has come up. But to give you an opportunity to expand, the most direct question was from Mark. Why did you sell out to Receipt Bank?
So I think we, as a team, we've loved developing the product and scoping the product as a team. I think what this has allowed us to do is we're going to expand the product team significantly in the next 6 months. So what we want to be able to do is we want to, particularly for myself and Jonathan coming from the accountancy side of things, we want to make people's lives as easy as possible. And limitations that we had at the moment was we were bootstrapped, so therefore we couldn't kind of hire more developers to help that process. And also from like a business perspective, obviously you need to have a sales and marketing function as well. And Receipt Bank's got a very good sales and marketing function. So what we're planning on doing is kind of coming together as a team. They've got some really good data. We can continue to focus on the product, develop the product to make sure that kind of customers and like yourselves get a really good product in the future. And then also we can link in with the Receipt Bank, who's marketing leading and what they do, and make it better for everyone.
Thank you. I think part of the shock, Simon, if it can be if shock's probably too strong a word, but I think when you spoke to lots of accountants, that their intention or their imagination was one of the big two, so either a blue or a green acquirer rather than an orange one. So I think that potentially took the surprise a little bit, but
yeah. Yeah, I think like I don't think we expected it, if we're completely honest. But I think we are a really good fit. We want to do the same thing, yeah, we're really excited about the partnership going forward.
Yeah, so it's a really, I think it's a really fascinating dynamic, especially when you go to what auto entry have done recently and all those sort of things. I just from an outsider's perspective, it's a really interesting marketplace at the moment. So just going back to some questions then, Wendy's asked, for accountants when they use Xavier, do they add the monthly cost to the client, generally speaking?
So I think yes and no. I think people who are using health reports and stuff like that, they often add that as an extra feature. I think where we genuinely think that you can save a lot of time that should be worth a lot more than £5 a month for the client, even if it is a year only client. The amount of time that you should be saving should be more than that. And I'm not just saying that because on the team, I genuinely believe that is the case. So hopefully we can do it so that both there's a time saving internally, but also you can also sell new products on to them, which might be in the form of a health report or something like that. Or it might be just you've got the opportunity to access their data so you can sell them some new features. Either that might be because you know that their transaction volumes have increased and you want to charge them more, or it's because you spot that they've got errors in X, Y, and Z and you can offer them additional services. So yes, people are charging for the health check, but additionally, I think some people are not because they're kind of absorbing it as an efficiency with internally, which also has got potential on-sell opportunities to their existing clients.
Thank you. And just to give a bit of insight on that from my perspective, Wendy, and this is not scientific by any stretch of the imagination, this is just hearsay. What I tend to find is that people or accountants within the community are using it for a quality control check of team members and to improve the quality of the information that they're already giving to their customers in a more productive way. And if I had to guess, I'd say it was kind of like 80-20, perhaps 90-10 in favor of people absorbing the cost from a productivity point of view, rather than trying to pass that cost on or creating a report that they can then charge the customer for. But might be an interesting little exercise to find out what exactly people are doing with it, Simon.
Yeah, that'd be good. And I think you might have seen, I think some people recently are kind of offering it almost as a free thing to do. They're offering a free health check for, I don't know, I think it was maybe Stuart Hurst, I think from Accounts and Legal, saying first 20 people free health check, which was just putting it in Xavier and giving them a report. So it's almost like a way to get new business in as well for them, offering it free.
As like a lead magnet, yeah. Instead of the bog standard 15-minute consultation, free discovery call type scenario, we'll assess your bookkeeping, and in a sort of very subtle way, you can demonstrate that somebody's perhaps not doing the job that you think they're doing, without actually saying they're rubbish, for want of a better phrase. So Jan has asked, will QuickBooks work on the same principle when it's integrated next year?
Yes. There might be some, so obviously we're integrated yet, so there might be some limitations with the integration with QuickBooks, and we are looking into that at the moment, but our plan is to have the exact same principle where we can. But if there's limitations in terms of what the data we can receive from the system, there's nothing we can do about that, but we will try and make it as closely aligned as possible.
Thank you. And then Wendy's just shared very interesting way to market using a lead magnet. So that idea went down very well. Nicola's asked, what's the best way to get clients added into the system, especially the prospects that won't always give you full access?
Yes, unfortunately, Yeah, unfortunately, you need advisor access, like just the way that the Xero access works. In order to link to a third party, you have to have advisor access. Um, yeah, that's just, I suppose, obviously they don't, from Xero's perspective, if you've got read only, they don't want you extracting all data and bringing it somewhere else. So it makes sense. But yeah, that's kind of a limitation that we've got, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Howard got your comment. Thank you very much. And then if I just go over here, Mike, one question that I definitely wanted to ask. We got 7 minutes left, Simon. What's the first 3 things a small practice with a limited client base should look to implement on each client with Xavier? And I don't think that really makes a difference how big the practice is. So if I was buying Xavier today, or I was investing in the free trial, so that's a bit of time and a bit of money. What's the first 3 things that that you would recommend that we did?
So yeah, so I think what I would do, the first thing I'd do is I'd load a few clients in there, potentially ones that you were familiar with, and ran the kind of the health check report, just kind of see what the health score is and see what the problems are to start with. That will hopefully get you introduced to the main cleanup features and the insight features in there, so you can have a little play around with them to see that information. The second thing that I do is then, if you are looking to use this as a quality tool ongoing, I would use one of the flow templates that we've got in the system, particularly around VAT returns. I think there's some good stuff that we do around VAT returns. We integrate with HMRC to be able to show you some information. So I would run a flow, which is what the checklist is called, for a VAT return. Just go through it and see if it spots things that you might not have done in your normal checklist. And the third thing is, what I would do is then, with the clients that you got in there, look at your practice dashboard and see like what information you can see from that which you wouldn't already know. So maybe you want to see who's got the highest turnover last month or something like that. Things that you might not be able to see from going into each individual Xero, and you can get some ideas turning about how you might be using it in the future.
Thank you. Howard's asked, has anybody used it when acquiring another practice?
So yes, people have done that. It's quite an interesting use case. I think they have used it to assess the quality of the data that other practice has, and then being able to use it as almost like a
stick,
not negotiation tool, but like saying, okay, this is what the things we need to do in order to change that. So yeah, I think that is an interesting use case.
Thank you. And then Sean's asked, are there any training videos available for Xavier so you can get started using it?
Yeah, so if you head to the website that Simon shared, there's a section called Learn, and in the Learn section, we've got a number of getting started videos, talking through the things that I've gone through. There's a couple of playbooks, which are kind of like, if you're planning on doing it for this process, how about trying these things out? So hopefully there's quite a lot of content on there for you. When I showed you the checks that were in the metrics that were in the health score, I was in a place called Help Docs. So the Help Docs is like a description, quite detailed, of everything we do. And lastly, we're really happy to help. So on the website, there's a chat bot. It's not a chat bot, it chats to us. It's a chat function, which you can drop us a line, and we'll get back in touch, and we can either kind of talk through on the chat or set up a call where we can talk through it as well.
Brilliant. So if anybody's got any questions that they're too shy to ask today, or any questions that they think about tonight when they lay in bed, the best way to do that, Simon, is to go to that URL that I've shared and to pop the question in the chat box, and then a human will come back to them. And
yeah, it'll be myself, Helen, or Dorocha probably, who will be answering on that. So yeah.
Thank you. What's the most commonly used feature, do you believe?
So I think people really like the multi-coded contacts. I think is, and I think I can't remember who said earlier, but someone said they found £800 of that earlier. So I think that is people are seeing real value to their clients from that feature, and it's the logic of it's quite simple, but it does spot quite a lot of errors. I think multi-coded contacts is probably the most popular, but it has been around probably one of the longest as well. So yeah, maybe that's why.
I think one of the easiest things. This is just a pure from my perspective. It's like when you look at it and it tells you when they've not claimed the VAT on a. So there's like 12 invoices, and one of those invoices has not got the VAT claimed on it. Such a really obvious thing to do. And the fact that spits that out and then allows you to claim that, it's just really, it's simple stuff. today it kind of looks a bit more complicated than what it actually feels in real life for me, Simon. I don't know whether that's because there's lots of stuff crammed into the hour section, but I just find it a really simple tool to use that I know that we're not maximizing the value out of it as yet. So Fiona's question, what we're on at 28, I got one from Weejay, and then I'm going to go to Fiona, and then that will be it because we'll be out of time. So Weejay's asked, what's the big difference between Sift and Xavier?
If I'm completely honest, I'm not entirely I think Zift is a workflow tool. Is that right? I'm not completely clued up on what Zift does.
I'm not 100% sure either, but I believe Sift effectively generates management reports, and we'll get a list in the chat box in a minute of all the things that Sift does. Generates management reports off the back of the information that Xero provides. So,
okay, yes, I think what we're doing separate to that is we're not going to generate a report for you. We are generating almost like a playbook or a checklist of things that you should check and try and make that a bit more streamlined. But I think if you are doing management reporting, there will always be a space for a management reporting pack, which might be out of the accounting system, or it might be a third-party app as well.
Yeah, so Neil shared Sift is a management information system. So basically, Xavier sits in between Xero and any of those other whatever they are, Sift being one of the management information systems.
Yeah, and I think some of the insights that I was going through at the end might inform what you put in your management information. So if it is that you want to highlight that you're too reliant on one supplier, or your sales have increased, or whatever it might be, hopefully the Xavier tool can help you write your narrative, which without having to kind of dive deep into the data.
Thank you. And Jan has just sneaked in. I think this is an interesting question, so I'm gonna ask it as well, and just overrun perhaps by a minute or two. Jan's asked, what is the benchmarking as an option?
So benchmarking is looking at how you're, so two things that we look at. So we look at revenue, we look at expenses, and we look at how that company that you're looking at compares to other companies in your portfolio. So a company of that age, of that size, and we also look at the industry and region. So you can see, how does this company compare to other companies in its cohort? And then the second thing is we take some of the information, we anonymize it, and then you can compare it against all the companies in Xavier on like a heat map. It's pretty, like the heat map, obviously we want to make sure that everyone's data is like is not disclosed, so that just shows you kind of like where they are generally on that list. So hopefully it gives a little bit of insight into how that company's performing against other companies.
Thank you. I think so. We've answered all those questions. All the other questions that came in, I think we answered on the way through. Just the last question from Fiona: how quickly from first setup can you realistically expect to see time savings from Xavier?
So I think like as with every process, like things will take a little time to embed, and it does depend on what you're doing already. So if you're doing a VAT return and you're not doing any checks on the data, this is going to take longer because you're suddenly going to be checking the information. But hopefully the quality output on that will be better, and there'll be less VAT inspections, et cetera, in the future. So I generally say that there's probably a 3-month time period at least to give to Xavier from starting up, trialing out the team, getting them set up. And once that's kind of period's over, there should be a lot of productivity savings after that time period.
Excellent. Thank you. So I'm getting lots of thank yous coming through. Thank you, Gordon. Thank you, Jan. Is there anything else you would like to share, Simon, before I go and get a cup of coffee?
No, thank you very much to everyone. And thanks very much to Simon for letting me be on today. So yeah, it's really great to speak to everyone. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. And just to remind you, the QRL is in the chat box if you want to go away and deal with that. Jeff's just shared about the QuickBooks. Jan's definitely going to have a play with a trial. Brilliant. So any questions at all when you lay in bed tonight or have a shower or whatever, and you think about them, pop it in the chat box. Otherwise, go to the URL and sign up for your free trial. And I, as always, would love to hear how you get on. Brilliant. Anything else, Simon? All done?
No, that's great. Thank you.
Brilliant. Excellent. Thank you very much. Big round of applause for Simon. And I'll disappear and get a cup of coffee. Cheers, Simon. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.